So today I thought I'd go into the making of my stop motion short film St. George and the Dragon, which I did for my final year course. So this will go through all the nitty-gritty details of how I made everything and what I did to animate everything. This little short 3-minute film, you can see here just little snapshots of the final film. You can see it obviously all on YouTube. A family of entertainers performing this tale of St. George and the Dragon. You're playing on all the medieval tropes and a bit of Christianity in there as well, obviously. So if we make a start, we'll start at the very beginning. This is my sort of layout of everything. So we'll go to the very first production Bible. Let's have a look. So I did this for my final year at university, my third year at Staffordshire University, and obviously we were given the task of making our own film within that year. And one of the parts of our task was obviously to produce a pre-production Bible that goes through all the little bits and bobs of details that of the film that we're going to make. Like prep, obviously a bit of my background. Obviously, I grew up a little bit in Australia, first 14 years of my life, and obviously I really loved old mythology and stuff. I loved the old Jim Henson Storyteller TV series, and obviously Lord of the Rings has an effect on me, and fantasy and science fiction is always good fun. And obviously I grew up in the circus as well, a very performing family, and quite a Catholic family as well. So obviously all of these things I thought would be fun to implement them all together in my final film. I took interest in various films in particular, like I think The Mummy Returns is very fun. You see the whole family sort of taking on the bad guy and the mummy in the film Mummy Returns, as well as obviously in Incredibles, and that sort of reflects more my childhood performing in the circus. You're earning your bread and butter in a way, and sort of helping the family out with the performance, as well as your dad and as well as your mum and everyone else. So there's that kind of communal aspect which I think a lot of people don't necessarily experience. You're heading to school and your dad's doing the work, your mum's doing the work. It's not the same experience. So I thought I'd implement a bit of my childhood in this film, which is quite a unique experience. And obviously they have certain films that influence me, like Incredibles, like Mummy Returns, like there's another fun one, the second Zorro film has sort of the family taking on the villain with that one. So they're always fun films I quite enjoy. So obviously there's a little script outline I did, keeping things fairly straightforward. I knew I wanted the sort of medieval circus theme as a part of the story, so I looked into the history of obviously medieval circuses, and obviously the pageant wagons were quite popular. I'm not sure the exact dates, obviously I'll have to look into it, but they were medieval period that people had sort of wagons, these large wagons which people will be standing on and performing on, essentially like the circuses had them as well. You see them in Dumbo with people performing on those floats, and those events in America, with the big floats in New York. You see them, those sort of pageant wagon type things, except they tell very obviously the stories that would relate to people at the time, obviously the good versus evil, and very Christian stories, using the stories of obviously the saints and the sort of the heroes, knights and demons, and good fighting evil. Well, I suppose not too dissimilar to the Marvel films of today, Iron Man and all the rest of it, Spider-Man, all that sort of thing, except obviously saints are real people, but obviously they'd maybe embellish visually for the effect, for the power of what these people did and all the rest of it. You see people like St. George and stuff, obviously St. Francis, Joan of Arc, but they were a bit later, to be fair. And yes, so there's sort of fun imagery here, obviously done at the time, you can see here, as well as later on in the 1950s. Again, there we go. So yeah, some imagery from the period you can see here, and as well as obviously here actual imagery from that period of performers. And there's this lovely, and that's something that I don't necessarily have in my film, that kind of almost like Napoleon Dynamite, this kind of almost a self-aware lack of irony, which makes it quite sharp and almost better than irony, and the kind of sort of humility, a kind of self-humility, which I quite like, which sometimes you can get a bit smart, clever clogsy with the modern comedies. Obviously can be really quite funny, at times, but obviously can be a little bit kind of, I find a bit obnoxious sometimes. But anyway, back to this. Some obviously artwork from the period. Obviously, Brothers Hildebrandt with this image, obviously, of Robin Hood here. I loved their Robin Hood illustrations were fantastic, as well as the unicorn tapestries, quite interesting as well, quite fun. Films for inspiration, obviously one of them would probably be The Seventh Seal. You see the family of entertainers, and they actually survive at the end of the film. Oh, spoilers there, but there's various characters involved in Seventh Seal, and one of the survivors are the family of entertainers, who are protected by the knight by playing obviously a game of chess with death. And obviously here's various screenshots from the said film. Obviously similar to what I would end up doing in mine, and but they don't have the kid perform as well, so I thought it wouldn't be fun having everyone perform, and do it that way. Another film of inspiration was The Court Jester, which is a fun Danny Kaye musical film, and he has all these wonderful costumes and goes on all sorts of adventures as the Court Jester. There's this lovely costume here which I took a lot of influence from for my dragon character, if not almost copy, but I wouldn't say a complete copy, but similar. Here is obviously Adventures of Robin Hood, which I hadn't seen up until I did the pre-production on this film, and that was another kind of really great, fun, epic Robin Hood film which I hadn't seen, and it's really quite sort of the almost quintessential Robin Hood, even though it's so old. I haven't seen one really as good as I think that one. It's kind of like the one to base all future Robin Hoods on, in a way. And that was just a bit of fun. It was an influence, but I didn't necessarily take anything from the costumes and such. And okay, so now character designs. So obviously I did a lot of sketches, and some of this is just throwing stuff at the walls, seeing what sticks, seeing what works. Just rough sketches here. Originally I'd planned the boy to be the dragon, and obviously the dad is St. George, because originally the idea was to have the dad as the real St. George, and that was at the end of the performance there would be a clever little hint that the dad was the actual St. George and the mum was the actual princess, and obviously they'd gone off and had a kid together and performed, to make their money, to get by. So I thought that was a fun idea, but didn't end up going with that one, and ended up going with the idea that the son St. George, it plays off more the circus, in the actual circus as a kid, and when you see other kids performing in the circus, the kid would always be the hero. The kid would always be the one who comes out on top, and the silly grown-ups and the silly parents would be the ones who, get destroyed by the kids. That's always the fun of the circus. So it wasn't really as fun to see St. George fighting his son, who's a dragon, and beat the son. That wasn't as fun as I was pointed. That was pointed out by my parents. They were like, no, you should probably have the kid as St. George, because that's more circus. That's more the circus vibe. So carrying on, here's some St. George artwork from obviously the period and from later on. This is a classic one, and I thought it'd be fun to really go off of the original, well, very let's say medieval, not original illustrations, but early illustrations. You see the dragon is often depicted quite small. I try to, again, my costumes take off of a lot of these early depictions to kind of make it a little as timeless as I could. It's always fun to make art when it's it's got a timeless quality to it. Nice little image of St. George there. And here, these little tiny little obviously manuscript artworks here, and there's another one, really nice one. And it's funny how the princess looks very similar in different illustrations. She has often similar garb and similar expression and profile. It's like almost the exact same. It's amazing. And the dragons are very similar as well. So yeah, moving on. Obviously these are some sketches of the early designs of the kid as the dragon, and that was a fun one, almost Peter Pan like character expression. That's more of a obviously there's various different designs here, and obviously the kid with the belt, the princess with the belt. It was obviously the princess ties apparently the belt around the dragon's neck and takes it to the town, and obviously St. George says, what does he say, something like if you all convert to Christianity, or or I'll kill the dragon. They go, fine. So all the pagans become Christian. So there you go. And then obviously we've got the father. So I ended up going with this dragon design, just playing with ideas. I thought like play on the jester theme with the dragon suit, but that made it a little less threatening. So I thought it would be fun to have it, you know, have it look a little bit more threatening, even though the jester design was a fun one, and I kind of do miss it a little bit. And I went with a more Roman helmet look, like he reused a Roman helmet to make the dragon face, you know, dragon hat. So you see more sketches here, taking from different designs. Obviously you see the Danny Kaye illustration there, hugely inspirational for all this. And just some facial designs. You know, you can see a little bit of Prince of Egypt there with the wide, what do you call it, wide cheekbones. That's quite Prince of Egypt-y, I think. And just playing around with different ideas here, really. It's just sort of seeing what works, what doesn't. You know, what's too Roman, what's too dry. A lot of these I did, was it 2018, I think, mid 2018, summer 2018, doing a lot of these sketches. Little rough ideas, playing off, you know, the illustrations from the day and sculptures during the day. More sketches of the father. This time, obviously as St. George was the original plan. That was always a fun sketch. I always quite liked that one. That probably would have been more what he would have looked like had I gone ahead with the father design in that way, and different iterations. The mother as well. So many ways you could do the princess. This one looked really nice. I was really proud of that sketch there. Obviously didn't go with it. I went, obviously there's some these great different looks for the princess, and I went with something fairly simple because it was just a bit, so many different characters to make and design, and you know, just make a nice dress. It can be enough. So more facial designs, and I love this sort of look. I wanted that kind of headdressy look, which you see in these older films like Henry V. She had a nice little headdress there, and various other films, you know. But yeah, there was something. There was no design exactly like this. I kind of sort of made it up, but I thought it worked quite well in the finished, puppet. And yeah, just more designs here. As you can see, I sort of had decided I like that look. Although that kind of headdress was I think came into fashion like a bit later. My film was based it was at the 12th century, 13th century, and it kind of came in more 14th, 15th century, this look, but because it was more advanced, and so it's funny because it's almost like more nostalgic of that earlier period in a way, you know, similar how the 80s is in some ways nostalgic of the 50s to some degree. You know, you can see that in Back to the Future and stuff. It's almost like the 15th century was quite nostalgic of the, 13th and 12th century, and they would kind of embellish those same designs in some way. At least I think they did. I mean, I could be wrong at this. I'm not a historian to that degree. So yeah, some more little fun visual references for the mother, different female characters and sculptures and all the rest of it. Nice little headdresses there and all the rest of it. And more visual reference. As I said, Henry V was an inspiration. Seventh Seal, various interesting faces, medieval sort of looking faces, if there can be a medieval looking face. And set design as well. So with the set design, obviously I went with something simple. You see, this is sort of basically the one I went with. Flat ground and little castle, something to suggest there's a little castle, and obviously the colourful tent, evoking the circus tent, very much so. And let's have a look, go further down. Yes, you can see the original design was more of a pageant wagon approach. You can see the little wheel there, but I thought it was just going to be so difficult to make, and it's like a set on a set. It's like setception, and I just thought it was a bit too heavy to do that much, although I did love the pageant wagon idea, but it was just a bit much for me to take on at that time. Even like 3 characters is still a bit mad for a full stop motion film working on your own, really, for that time period. I had to work on it. More films for inspiration. Let's check out. I've said everything. Yeah, that's everything. More films of inspiration. Obviously, the bits and bobs. Obviously, Princess Bride has some fun little looking tents and stuff. The Jabberwocky, that's Terry Gilliam's film. Quite grubby and dirty look at the Middle Ages, and similar to almost what's his name, Bruegel, a Bruegel-y looking sort of style. Because you can quite enjoy Bruegel sometimes with its sort of that take on humanity, where you get his drawings and paintings of people going about their business. And let's scroll down more. Various films, and obviously Disney's Sleeping Beauty is obviously amazing how they took on those old illustrations, medieval illustrations. I forget the name of the artist who worked on that, but he was quite, was it Wolfgang Reitherman? I'm not sure it was Reitherman, but there was one of the I think he worked on various the action sequence with the dragon, the prince fighting the dragon, which you could claim as some sort of influence for my film, but probably not really. But those illustrators who worked on that film were just amazing artwork throughout that film. And obviously King Arthur to a less degree. Disney's King Arthur is very American in sort of vibe and tone. It doesn't feel very European at all, to be honest. And it's almost, you're heading almost towards that kind of modern sort of what do you call it, modern look of it, like A Knight's Tale and such, where it's kind of a modern look in the Middle Ages, where Sleeping Beauty kind of evokes the European vibe much better, I think. So we go down, we see the father, and I went with made a final decision. It's always difficult when you're working on your own films to just go, this is the design, and just stick to it. But generally speaking, when I was working on my own, I sort of played around for a long time, but then ultimately just went with what was most visually quite simple and striking. And obviously the helmet, and the Roman helmet as well, design, I thought was quite fun. But it's been adapted to look like a dragon. The father character looks a lot like my dad, his appearance, obviously kind of evoking my childhood, and it's just easier because I know my dad's face has quite an open. He's a performer, so he has quite an open expression, open face, which I knew would work with this kind of role, so almost like a clown. Yes, so we scroll down, we see obviously the mother character design, again fairly simple, nice. When I see that kind of what do you call it, silk belt, I guess you call it. Obviously in the original story she uses it to tie around the dragon's neck, obviously. But I always think of the elves in the Last Alliance elves in Lord of the Rings, because I used to paint them with little miniatures for so long that whenever I see this, I think of them. I can't help it. I think of painting them as well. I think of like a highlight there, and then brush strokes coming down. And then obviously the sun. So obviously classic. I wanted the nice cross, and obviously I'm in the UK now. I've grew up in Australia, so the classic. St George Cross, and also obviously the Crusader. There's the Crusades element there. Yes, but I kept it fairly simple, like almost Roman-y kind of design there, tunic-y look. Fairly simple, and was that. Scrolling down, obviously the final set design I went with, kept it fairly simple. I say I kept things simple. It was still a nightmare to do everything, and it kind of. I'm scared to take on productions as big as that one ever since. I used was it Malvern Armatures, and just sent in the body design and got that sent through, and got the armature through and paid for it and all the rest of it, and obviously used it, as I'll go into later. Fabric design, obviously I talked to various people about different fabrics, whether I could use printed materials for the fabrics. I just went with something simple. I didn't really go too heavily into much. Did an animatic. This goes into animatics and sound. Obviously, I'm just talking about sound design and planning here. So yes, so that's that. As well as that, obviously I did various animation tests to see what I could do. Was playing with the armature I got from Malvern Armatures, movement tests, working out what juggling would look like. A lot of this was just for the course. It needed to show tests. I probably wouldn't have bothered with a lot of this stuff, because you can kind of figure a lot of this stuff out when you're working on the final film. But obviously tests can be useful and good, and I was working out the juggling the swords moment. And obviously there's some nice paper blowing scenes for when I, you know, had the paper blowing throughout the film, various moments. That was a nice little shot there. I was always proud of that little paper scene. And what else? Obviously, I can also go forward into looking at the sculpting work. I'll just see here. You can see here. Sort of the head design sculpts, working with NSP, was it? Clay. So yeah, there you go. See that? Originally it was supposed to be all silicon, and I spent, you know, ages, spent weeks, if not months, trying to work out the silicon to get that working, to make it look like the Corpse Bride puppets. But in the end, I just went with silicon for the bendable parts, like the hands and the arms and the legs. But for the face, I just went with resin. And it was supposed to be more like a. I had this whole thing planned with these little wires that could make the cheeks go up and down and stuff, but that didn't end up panning out in the end. So never mind. Let's have a look here. And we have the, let's have a look. Here we go, the little animatic. And this is just early version, in the early days. It's interesting to see how much I just kept to the animatic, really, with everything I ended up doing. Got a few voice actors involved. And,
It was
yeah.
that St. George slew the dragon and brought peace to the kingdom.
Yeah. So the story has been told in full. The legend of St. George and the dragon.
There you go, just a simple little animatic. Do I have the... No, I don't have the final sequence, so there you go, that's that. And then I'll go to the production Bible part 2. So, yes, so here we go, part 2. So at part 2, we're talking about the, obviously the model making period, where obviously I'm mold making as well, you know, when I'm using various clays. I forget the name of this one, my goodness. It's it's the wet, is it wet clay, and using that to make my molds, and obviously foam board as well, so you can see some of them. And I spent so much time on this to make it look so nice for potentially getting work at studios, you know. So, and during this whole production, you know, every part of the production I tried to well document and well produce, just so obviously, you know, I thought maybe I might end up working as a model maker at Wicken & Saunders, or maybe an animator at Aardman or whatever. So I wanted to be open to all of that, so I tried to do, you know, the top, you know, the very best I could do at everything. And some nice little stuff here you can see with me getting a really nice little shot here. It's all staged, of course, but all the right sizes of everything, and really filing everything down beautifully, and getting sheets for every character, and what do you call it, design sheets. Now these are really, really useful, because obviously I could get the character to scale with the outline and then place my design of the armature underneath. So basically I was fully ready for when I made the armatures. It was really very, very simple. I just overlaid everything over the photo, well, not the photo, the printout, and, you know, it made my life a lot easier in some ways. Although, to be fair, when I'm lazy these days, I might just use, you know, I'll go, well, that's good enough, you know, and maybe potentially save time. But this was really neat and really a nice way of doing it, to just make sure you have that extra quality in your work. It's always nice sometimes, if not exhausting if you're overdoing it with everything else. Here we go. We have some obviously foam, some really nice hard foam to work on with the puppets, which is quite light and very firm, so when you glue stuff in place it doesn't bend and stuff like with soft foam. Obviously you can use balsa wood. I mean, really you don't have to use this special stuff. You could use, you know, like balsa wood's quite fine, you know, and takes a little extra time. This is just a bit quicker to work with. Yes, various little bits and bobs. Working out the hands here, using a bit of green stuff, and because you're gluing things in place. And obviously you have all the puppets laid out there quite nicely, all ready to go. It's always nice to have these little K&S little slots where you can put in a rigging for the characters, especially if they're doing somersaults or you want to pin them in place somewhere. You know, it's quite nice to have those K&S little points, quite handy, you know. And here you can see the heads. I thought I was going to use silicon faces and have moving eyebrows and stuff, but obviously that was that I spent ages on that, but it didn't end up going anywhere. So I thought the resin faces just ended up working quite well anyway. Obviously various working with the silicons and stuff, more silicon stuff, and here's the molds. They looked a bit grubby in the end, but you know, it was difficult. It was, ironically, I didn't have access to the studio. The studio was closed over the week I was doing the molding, I think, or the few days I was molding, which is unfortunate. It was quite frustrating. So I had to do them outside, and of all days, it just happened to suddenly start snowing when I was doing the molding, and it just had to be done. So I was like, okay, fine. So I had to do the molding outside, and it was snowing, and I remember just having a face mask and not having a good time. But you know, a lot of them, to be fair, the molds came out fine and they worked okay. They just looked a bit grubby, to be honest. Especially this side, gosh, that looks all milliput fixed. Oh my gosh, it's embarrassing to see that side, but that side looked okay in the end. Here we go. Obviously popping them in the mold using is it plumber's tape or something, just to make sure the joints don't get all gummed up when I'm working with them. Obviously putting a skin in first of the silicon, and then putting that in, and then pouring in the final silicon, you know, in. I'm trying to remember. I haven't used silicon in a while, so I'm just remembering. And obviously working out the armature heads here, so it was a bit of fun. There we go. Obviously it didn't work out so well. I just found difficulties in painting the silicon, working with the silicon. So the sword fabrication, obviously I made a sword design, and then I molded it. So I had obviously could do multiple swords, and I put in a bit of aluminium powder, so they could stick to rigging at any point, which was very useful, quite fun. I mean, I used it a bit, but obviously I found often blue tack or black tack was often good enough because it was very light. I put in a lot of what's it called? There's a name for it. There's like a filler, resin filler you can put in to make things a lot lighter. I forget the name of it. It's like this powder, and it just really, is it phyllite or something? Makes stuff really, really light. It's amazing how light you can get resin stuff if you put in that powder. Let's have a look. Obviously insect pins is quite useful for the sewing stuff, pinning stuff in and stuff. You can see here, mother's dress just took about, you know, a few days per puppet, you know, obviously, or so. And the father as well, and the son, you're getting everything sorted out. And sticking these on, I think the father puppet worked out the best, really visual wise. I quite liked the design. It was quite nice, worked out well, and his bendability was quite good. The armature worked fairly well underneath. Some parts didn't work with his bendability, and to be fair, and I did find sometimes the wire puppets did work better than expected, so it was a mixed bag. Set design, you know, I went, you know, I tried to do the very, very best I could with the set, so everything's really super neat and tidy, and you can see here, got those little soft edges on everything, and really going for, you know, spare no expense kind of vibe. And obviously putting on the grass, the turf, astroturf or whatever grass, and you know, keeping things simple, figuring things out as I go along, and giving it that realistic vibe. A lot of these techniques, obviously, I used a lot with Games Workshop figures, so that was kind of fun. And there you go. And obviously a background was a big board that I painted. Similar to Aardman, they do big boards to paint this, you know, clouds and stuff. And the one thing I'm really disappointed in my own work here is obviously the background was super, super simple, and I would have liked to have done more, you know, textures and model making with different, maybe a little houses in the background and a little village in the background or something, but I just didn't have time. But whenever I look at my film, I'm always cringing at the background. I would have loved to have put more, just so much more stuff into it, just to give it the whole scene so much more life. So it was such a missed opportunity, and really, looking back, I really ought to have just, you know, done it, put in the extra days. But the problem is, at the time, you know, you're already behind schedule, and you're like, gosh, I don't know if I'm going to get this done in time, and you can't see the future, so you just think, you know what, this is going to take a few extra days to do that better, and this looks good enough, so I'll just move forward. But I do look back and go, ooh, it would be nice just to put in that extra time. You know, you always learn. So here we have obviously the cart elements, which are all printed out in a, what was it called? Yeah, printed in MDF with a laser cutter. And yeah, I designed it very quickly, and it came out very quickly. I think it was like, you can see here, the whole process was, what, 45 minutes, an hour? So I was amazed by how quick I could just make stuff with the MDF board and design it and print it out, and wow, that was impressive. I was quite impressed by that. So here we go, it's set up in the studio at Staffordshire University, and obviously I'm using hot glue to pin everything in place. Hot glue is very cool because you can loosen it as well using lighter fluid, so it's not absolutely permanent if you don't need it to be. And obviously further work on the set. Again, you can see here, oh, it'd be so lovely if they're just, imagine a little village or something, a little tiny road, and oh, such a missed opportunity, but it is what it is. Let's go down here. Yeah, you can see the setups, obviously with all the lights. I really made sure the set was really super lit, well lit, and very simply lit as well. I didn't want any overly dramatic, clever lighting, because I wanted it to be easy to shift the camera around and stuff, and just simple lighting I thought was more evocative of what look I was going for. I was going for the more Ray Harryhausen's. He did various fairy tale films in his early work, and I thought, oh, I'll evoke that kind of, was it Little Red Riding Hood he made, and I evoked a lot of his looks with the characters' faces as well. Was it Harryhausen, Little Red Riding Hood? Retract. Let's have a look. So here we go. You can see here, Little Red Riding Hood. Here we go. Let's have a look.
Been ill with no.
So yeah, this kind of obviously flat
All
lighting.
to smell with.
See if I can find it. Oh look, I miss it every time. Here we go.
Dear boy,
So you can see here, this is a very, very simple, fairly flat lighting, but quite iconic as well. I always think this, picture of his, Little Red Riding, was very iconic, and I think his parents helped him work on it as well, which is interesting. His dad did the armatures, I think, and his mum did some of the sewing of the characters' costumes. So that's kind of fun family production from Ray Harryhausen. So yeah, and obviously I'm working in Dragon Frame, obviously DSLR camera there as well, and setting everything up for it. All the sets and all the rest of it, and rigging. There's some publicity imagery I did for the film. Obviously I did little mouth cutouts, which actually worked really well. A lot of people said, they were like, how did you do the mouth? And I was like, oh, it was all cut out, and they couldn't, a lot of people were surprised, like, no, it didn't look cut out. But yeah, a lot of it was just because I shaded the interior of the mouths. I really took my time to make it look realistic, like it was three-dimensional, and it gives off that effect, even though it's just a cutout. If you do it Robot Chicken style, like really rough and chiseled and whatever, it doesn't have that same, it looks like it's paper, which can be the style you might want. You might want that rough and ready look. So yeah, I was happy with that. Animation worked fine, lighting was fine, although I was a bit sick of having that much lighting, obviously with this set being so large and the puppets being so large. I had to light everything. It was a bit much with the lighting, to be honest, but I did need it. So yeah, scrolling on, you can see a bit of the set, bit of the behind the scenes, what's going on here. Various people helping me out, and obviously what I would do is I'd work, get up in the morning, was it 6:30 or something, and then start work at 8 o'clock, or 7:30, 8, and I would work all the way through till 9 o'clock at night, with little 15-minute breaks here and there, and like a short half hour here or an hour there, but it tended, full on about, I worked out it was like something like 10 and a half, if not 11 or so hours a day of full on work. It was, as far as I felt at the time, it was basically, I rested exactly what I needed to get the rest I needed, and then back to work. It was super full on, and the weekends as well. Obviously working almost full time. I think pretty much doing all the editing processes on Saturday, sometimes even Sunday as well. And it was a bit. I think I really did overdo it sometimes with some of the work I did in this film. Really, obviously the weekends working as well, and just like around the clock work. And I would work in the library, because that's where they'd have the software and such to work in. So it was interesting being in that library and the people that would come in, and you get to know the people who'd come in because they'd be with their friends and stuff. So even though I never spoke to them, there were other people in the library who I just got to, because I spent so many hours there, I got to know them, kind of, you know. And obviously the editing out, rigging and stuff was a big one for me. Although I did find if you sometimes, like I probably overworked on this film, that I actually had to de-rig the sword film, the sword scene when they're juggling the swords. I had to de-rig that 3 times because I kept on losing the files or getting them or they get corrupted or something. So I had to do it 3 times, which is like, it's so much work. It was crazy, but that's what happens. I think when you're overworking, you can kind of not work smart, and you work slow. So there are benefits to taking rests and having fresh eyes for sure. And obviously the backgrounds worked out, those that design, classic medieval fonts and stuff, all worked out well. So there you go, there's the production Bible side of it. I found a nice, it's nice music from, I forget his name, is it Brandon Fleischer, is it? An American fellow, he did on his YouTube, had a nice little tune. I can play it here. Yeah, so you can hear it here. Which is just sort of suited my, my purposes. I wanted something simple, and I like a nice twang, sort of twanging sound of the harp, so I thought that worked out fairly well. I mean, obviously it'd be nice to have something really elaborate and really, a real harp playing or something, but I can only work with what I have, So I've showed you the sculpture, so we can go into the turnarounds. I think that's pretty cool. So these are turnarounds I did. This is for the course, and obviously to show off my puppet making abilities. Obviously, that's quite nice there. These puppets have since been a little bit run down, because this was obviously before I started shooting. Obviously, you're working with different materials, making the silicon evoke cloth, and obviously sometimes cloth evoking silicon and painting on the cloth, and using obviously clay for the hair was interesting with the kid. The mother puppet, obviously, maybe not the best material for sure for her dress, but I did find it worked out fine with her just sitting there. You could kind of make the folds to make it look better, sculpt the folds in to make them look nicer. And I think I'm almost there. I think that's almost everything. Let's have a look. Yes, I think that's just about it. So if we go to the final film here, and you can see, obviously, using the animation, see frame by frame, rigging stuff out, a bit of wind, obviously the text as well there, 1290.
But there's only one person.
It doesn't matter. We have already been paid.
So you've already been paid. The whole point of that was sort of to show off the entertainer's life of, whenever you're performing, you're thinking of, where your money's coming from and who you're working for and what your goals are with the performance, to, if you've done what the person asked, what they want to get paid, you can always overdo one element of the performance, but it's not what you're there for, and the person comes up at the end to pay you, and they're like, well, I liked it, but it didn't have the thing I asked for. So that's always what you're thinking about, and that lifestyle, and also the beauty of that lifestyle. But I just wanted to put that part of the reality of circus life and performance life in there.
Okay.
Good day and welcome one and all. Now I will tell you a story of great saints.
So some of this
and
animation is a bit
terrifying
simple. I like this one. It's not my best
courage in the
animation,
face of
but
terror.
and that was really, that little hand scene was virtually animated almost in I think Photoshop. I kind of shifted things around a bit to make things look nicer, because I had to shoot the scene really quickly to get it done.
Tail takes the form of a dragon.
And obviously nice blowing
I'm
there.
starved. I must eat this princess to...
I was always cringing at this scene. I kind of had to get it done quite quickly, and the way he moves in
my
this,
eternal hunger.
sort of embarrassing. Some of this stuff, some of the animation here.
By divine chance, the whole...
And her mouth, like originally she wasn't talking in this scene, and her mouth was actually put in post-production here, so it wasn't actually in person. His mouth was. But obviously using clever filters, you can't tell.
A noble knight St. George was travelling through the kingdom.
Here we go. You can see as well, a lot of the characters' movements are quite safe. You know, I'm playing it very safe because obviously the set's quite big and hard to reach over, and I wanted to put all my effort in certain moments. So like the somersault scene, certain little scenes where I really wanted to pull all the stops, and everything else I just wanted to make sure it got done in time and was up to a nice, clean quality. But obviously looking back, if I had more time, or if I was in a position of, being more comfortable with setting myself up, working on the set, it probably would be spend a bit more time making all this stuff a little less stilted. And also experience, with more experience you can just do that, the more poppy, vibrant animation.
Thing.
More flesh for my feast.
Then we must duel. A duel of...
I was really happy with the sword as well, the painting on the sword. Obviously I've painted a lot of miniature swords in my time. That was just something I really quite liked. And the hair as well on the kid, look there, looks quite nice. The plasticine, new plast.
Skill and might.
And that scene was a bit of a nightmare because obviously you'd have him move away, and then if that actually that scene wasn't too bad, but if you bumped the sword a little bit, you'd have to you'd spend like almost an hour, some frames, to get the cloth in the exact same place because it's not very forgiving, that cloth. And here we go, the great somersault, which is obviously pretty much a frame. For some of those frames, it was an hour a frame to get them done. Get them just in the right spot with obviously the rigging and all the rest of it. And what's funny for this, the angling of everything, you might be able to tell, but the father, the boy, I can't remember. I think the boy was leaning too far, like quite far forward, because you see the father, he's actually leaning. I think normally he's facing normal upright, but the kid, when he lands, to make it work for camera, it was weird in that he's almost, if you looked at it from outside the camera, this viewpoint, it looked like he'd be falling over because he's leaning quite forward, but it kind of worked for the shot, so I left it in. And this happens in stop motion, where in the camera's axis you can't tell if characters are leaning too far forward or whatever, and it just works for it, so you work with it. Now that scene, that was another really tough scene. This one just here, when he grabs and pulls them out, because as he was pulling them out, naturally this cloth would just jitter and this would bunch really high and whatever, and just having him grab it and hold it firmly and then pull it out and have it be stuck in his hand. Maybe I could have worked out better rigging looking back for that. But anyway, I got away with it, and you don't notice the intense suffering that this scene was. This was one of the toughest scenes, if not the toughest scene on the film, ironically, and it's just a simple little shot, and it's just because of this cloth being so jittery, and like you breathe on it and you just have like it would just lump in weird places, and you have to make it perfectly match where it was before. It's quite frustrating, really. Oh, and also animate it going down a little bit there as well. You can see it go down as he leaves. And the juggling scene, obviously they're all rigged behind, and obviously I have a plate and I can just de-rig things in post-production. And a sneaky point to make is obviously the mother is not playing the harp at all, and that was obviously deliberate. I think it was practicality wise, for some reason I thought I could either do it in post or just leave it. And I thought if I have time to do it in post, I'll do it in post. If I don't think it's the end of the world, and I'll make it just like a little sneaky Easter egg if you want to see it. Obviously, if I'm working on a proper production like with Aardman, obviously that's something you would do, or potentially you can ask them to have it done in post. You do them in separate plates and passes, and that can be quite efficient way of doing it too. It's just what the work requires. That's all a bit of fun, a classic performance. It's amazing that obviously they're all made of resin, but you give the cling and it makes it seem like it's metallic,
so it was that St. George slew the dragon and brought peace to the kingdom.
The story has now been told in...
And this is like the classic. I always think of like Chevy Chase comedy, you know, it's like, was it National Lampoon's Vacation kind of vibes when I see this, or American comedies, you know, with the dad with his with his hand on his cheek, you know what I mean, that kind of expression. And I thought that worked well for what, you know, I was doing here. See the son, you can be seen as obviously St. George, princess, the dragon, but also obviously as a Catholic there's another side to it. You can see obviously that it could be a very medieval kind of Christ, and then Mary, and then the devil. And so there's like, and obviously their performance, so you have those three levels. You have the Jesus, Mary, the devil, you have St. George, the princess, the dragon, and then you have obviously you know, the acrobat, the musician, storyteller, and the, you know, the dangerous performer, the fire breather. What else does he do? Obviously acrobatics as well, fighting, and obviously they're all performing together as family. So it's like a trinity of trinities in some ways, which I was playing around with. And what's great about this shot, which is why it's one of my favourites in the film, is that you don't notice the terrible background here, which I can't stand. And you know, like if I had a beautiful details on the back here, you wouldn't notice them anyway. So that's what I like about this shot. But in all the other shots, it's like, oh, I really wish I had something in the back there. But and I'm really happy with this harp as well. I really like how it's, you know, posing it and painting it. You know, this is the fun stuff for me. And the cloth, obviously, you can just get, and works quite well. You kind of stick it there still. When you want a bit of wind look, you just rustle the bristles there, and it, you know, gives that effect. Yeah.
Full, the legend of St. George and the dragon.
Hey!
And I thought it was fun to have a single viewer that's watching them. Because sometimes as an entertainer, you do have just one person watching you, you know, but you've been paid, so you're there to perform, so you do the performance, even though there's like one person watching. But you always imagine what if that person was like, you know, Steven Spielberg's son or someone, you know, someone, you know, really important. So then you feel like it's worth more or something, or this person will eventually become the next Steven Spielberg or great actor or something, next Tom Cruise or something, you know.
Yeah.
And obviously the end credits, kind of going back, harkening back to the opening credits with the cloth blowing away. And here we go, yeah. And obviously simple design, simple, just easy to produce. And have these little epilogue moments. And having the characters take down the set, I thought was quite nice, because that's something you experience in the circus, where you finish the show and then you'll take everything down on the same day. You know, you'll literally perform in the circus. You perform that the final night, and everyone would cheer, and they'd all go home, and you'd immediately be at work packing up. You know, so that often like 3 o'clock in the morning after the nighttime show, you know, finish the show at like 10 o'clock. By 3-4 o'clock, you've packed up the whole tent, and you're ready to drive to the next, you know, location to set up again. And I thought I wanted to evoke that a bit with this scene. What was fun also with this scene is you have the dad taking down the cloth there, and how I did that was very, very simple. I literally just cut the set. It was because it was full on sewn or glued in, and I just cut it frame by frame, and it works. It was amazing how well it worked. It was literally just cutting it with scissors, frame by frame. The mother's sort of just looking around. She's not really doing much. I didn't have much for her. Her armature wasn't as useful, and obviously her clothing wasn't great to animate with. So I just had to do some sort of put it away and just have a look around for a while. And that all worked okay. That was fine. Here we go. And for this scene, there's a bucket of water, obviously, and this was like a last-minute addition. I think I showed it to my family, and I think my mum said, because you've had fire, you've had sort of earth with them performing and doing somersaults, gravity, you know, landing and stuff. So you've had wind with the blowing paper. It'd be nice to have some water as well. So I thought, okay, where can I put water? So I snuck it into this little end credit sequence there, and the water was using, let's have a look, here we go, so you can see it's using oh my goodness, it's clean film, obviously, and that works very well for water in a lot of places. In Aardman uses clean film for water, and it's very useful. And then let's see, I'll see it, and then it turns into little parts. It's so difficult. Oh my gosh. Oh, I missed it again. There we go. So you can see how it splashes and, you know, and then obviously what I did is I used either some sort of, I think it was KY jelly or something like that, some various like gel or something, and sort of animate it to look like it was wet, and then animate it down so it sort of gives that watery effect. And obviously put it over on this as well. Maybe a few little beads as well to give it that effect of bubbles. Here we go. See, thanks to all the teachers. Obviously, you know, it's great to have the studio space and the time, you know, which I was given. You see, the teachers were constantly allowing me to use the cameras longer than, you know, I was probably allowed. You know, should have been. You know, I kept on asking them if I could have special permission to take them out again, which is, you know, very cool. So yes, obviously thanks to all the help for the obviously all the fellow students and stuff, and you know, it was good to get it all done at Staffordshire University, and I was quite happy with the logo. Worked quite well with the red, you know, and worked quite well with the theme. And obviously the Staffordshire knot, you know, Staffordshire has a history of pottery and makers and making things. Obviously it's connected to the north of Birmingham kind of makers, you know, that kind of culture, makers culture, you know, they make jewellery or whatever. And Tolkien obviously is North Birmingham as well, and that was part of his late Victorian, you know, he's almost inspired when he made the Shire, and, you know, did the Shire, created the world of the Shire in the Hobbits. It was going off of that kind of makers, people who were the tinkerers and the makers and the, you know, farmers and whatever, the gardeners. And it's sort of, that world's a bit lost now, but the world where I went to Staffordshire was obviously it's just north of where Tolkien grew up, but very close. So it's nice to follow on from that history, you know. It's quite lovely. There we go.
You're still here?
So this was obviously, they're all packed up, they're going, and I'm obviously sneaking a little bit off of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which is one of my favourite films, really fun film, and I really love the idea of, you know, people watching through all the credits, and then the character kind of berates them for, you know, you know, what are you doing? What are you, you know, have you got a life to go to? And yeah, and that's about it. So I hope you enjoyed that, and yeah, please like, subscribe, and, you know, what do they call it? Hit the notification bell and all the rest of it. Hope you enjoyed.